Hey everyone, this is Max with Dutchman Co. Today I'm going to take you through how I made these bar stools. What you'll see me doing here is just laying it out. I want to get it down on a piece of wood, start seeing what it looks like. The biggest question that we're going to try to answer first here is what angle we want our backrest and our back legs to be sitting at. Luckily for you guys, I go ahead and figure all that out for you so you don't have to. You'll be able to get the plans down in the description that will give all the measurements, all the angles, everything I use throughout this. But at first, we're just laying it out. Your backrest usually wants to sit somewhere between 7 to 10 degrees. I do choose 8 degrees for this and then 5 degrees set back on the legs. Laying it out here on the piece of wood, make sure it's going to look right. But then we're going to get into the real way you're going to want to cut this out. All right, we have our leg laid out and our angles decided. To cut this out, you could use a jigsaw or a bandsaw, but we need multiple of these legs and they need to be exactly the same, and that becomes super hard to do if you're gonna hand cut each of them. So the best method is to go ahead and make a jig. I'm gonna make a jig out of a 1/2 inch maple plywood. With this jig, we're gonna make it actually a little bit longer just in case we make more bar stools in the future. That are taller. This can accommodate it too. If they're shorter, it'll obviously be able to accommodate those too. So with this, we'll then be able to use it on the router table and get perfect cuts. Let me show you how. I was very happy with how well this jig worked, so I want to take a little bit of time here and explain to you so you can make one for yourself. It made this build so much easier. But what we're doing here first is just marking out what's going to be our flat spot, the middle spot. It's a 4-inch section that's cut with no angles, straight. That'll allow us to connect our aprons and our seat to it nice and easy, and then we'll do our angles off of that. A good habit to get into, especially if you're like me, is make sure to mark the side that you're putting against your fence so you can keep the same side there, and then mark your top and your bottom and which angle needs to be cut on each one, because inevitably you always end up cutting the wrong angle in the wrong spot. So it's best to mark it first. Now, cutting the angles is pretty simple. You're just going to cut, say you're on your bottom leg, you'll cut your 5 degrees, and then you'll slide it up, keeping the same side on the fence, and cut the same 5 degree right there. That'll give you parallel 5 degrees, and that's what you want. Then just go ahead and do the same thing for the top at whatever angle you decide the backrest to be. Do a quick double check of all your measurements. Make sure you're not already catastrophically going wrong. Super easy to cut these down to width. You don't have to worry about the angle or anything. You just cut them directly at the width you want, all the same. With those pieces ready to go, you just got to connect them. And honestly, you don't even have to connect them if you don't want to. You'll be able to double side tape them on your piece and use a router if you want. I'm going to go ahead and use a domino because I have it and make it easy. You can use Craig screws. You could tape it. You could glue it, however you want to. Here, I like to take my time with the layout. One, it kind of stinks having to cut a leg like this because there is going to be a lot of waste. There's no really good way to fit it onto the wood, but you try your best. I really like to try to focus and pay attention to the wood grain here so I can get the best look. A lot of times that means I just sit and stare at it for a really long time until some kind of idea comes to me. I'm hoping to be able to get the quarter sawn effect that you'll find in oak, which I'll show you that after we cut it out. But I'm going to bring it over to the bandsaw, start cutting these down, not all the way to the line, but as close as I can, and then we'll be able to use the router to clean it up. Don't be confused, my bar stool is not having 4 back legs. I'm building a couple extra bar stools too, so you may see a couple extra pieces cut. Now is when I'll take it over to the jointer and the planer to get it perfectly flat. I wait till this step just because it's easier to handle when they're smaller. I did get sent this beast of a router bit. I'm not sponsored or anything by them, but they did send it to me. But I love it. This thing absolutely eats through these huge pieces of oak. So I'll put that down in the description. Pretty simple. We're just going to use some double-sided tape here. I didn't have double-sided tape, so I'm using 2 pieces of tape and then glued together. And then we'll be able to run that across the router. Make sure you keep your piece flat to the router table. I know a lot of times whenever I've been moving it across, not paying attention, I let it tip a little bit and I take a big chunk out of the side. Just pay special attention to that. Even with that huge router bit, I'm not going to attempt to cut the ends with it. So I'll just pull the jig off, slide the jig down to whatever height I want for the legs or for the backrest, mark it, make a cut. Now that I cut one leg down to size, it's really hard to transfer it over, try to cut on the miter saw and get the exact same cut. And it's super important to have the exact same cut because we are doing these as legs. Obviously, we don't want the chair to be wobbly. So I decided to go ahead and tape them all together the best I could, line them all up. And that allowed me to take it over to the miter saw, cut them all at once. And that'll give me the exact same length of leg for all of them. Now I've cut a whole bunch of pieces to the right width, and then I'll cut them down to length as I need them. I went ahead and jointed and planed them so they'll be ready to go. Down in the description, you can get the plans. That'll have the cut list and all the dimensions and things I used, but I'm not going to waste time going through it all here. So we'll go ahead and skip to the part where these are all cut, and we can go ahead and start putting together the frame of the chair. I'm starting with the sides of the chair, so I will line up the apron exactly where I want it on the back leg, which should match up the height of the front leg. And I'm going to use dominoes to put this part together. You can use Craig screws, dowels, mortise and tenon, really any kind of joinery you're comfortable with. This bottom side stretcher is probably the most complicated piece we have left to put on there. Well, not including when we have to put the seat on. We'll get to that later. The reason being is it's going to need to be cut at an angle for the back leg. The back leg is at 5 degrees, as we know. So I went ahead and took a piece of plywood, cut it to the length I thought with the 5 degree, just to make sure it's all going to work out. Sometimes you may have to adjust a degree or so, or sometimes you couldn't get your measurement right. This will allow you to know if it's correct before you actually cut one of your good pieces. I have one more step before I start gluing this all together, and that is going to be to chamfer each of the corners. You could break them any way you want. You could use a round over bit. Some people just use their sandpaper just so they're not so sharp. I'm going to use the hand plane here because that little bit of chamfer really adds a little character to the piece. I think it looks really good for these shaker styles. Now put together your side frames. No matter what type of joinery you're using, make sure to use wood glue. With those side frames all dry, I'm going to finish building the frame, adding the front and back aprons and the front and back stretcher. The main important note about this is where you're putting that front stretcher. That front stretcher is obviously going to play as a footrest also. So you really want to pay attention at where that one is put to make sure it's an ideal location for a footrest. You're usually looking about 11 to 18 inches below the seat, which is a pretty big variable. Maybe think about the people you're building it for or test it out yourself and see if you feel like it's a comfortable position. As you see me using throughout the build, that straw picks out little pieces of glue throughout the crevices. I love that method. You do want to follow up that straw method by wiping the crevices with water. Water breaks down wood glue, so just make sure to get the rest of it off of there so it doesn't show up in your finish. While those frames dry, go ahead and start putting together your seat. You'll see me marking these lines across, and that's just whenever I get to a spot where I like the grain pattern, I mark the lines so I don't lose them when I go to glue it up. A very important step, which I've made the mistake a time or two, is I start putting these grains together and I slide one board up and slide one board down, and even though they're all oversized, it actually comes up to a spot where it's too short when you come to cut it down to the final size. So make sure to do one more measurement and that they're all in a good spot. Nothing super special about this glue up, just some wood glue and clamps, but you do want to get in the habit of using a cross member piece across any of your glue ups really, but that'll keep the whole thing flat so then you can pull it all tight together. With the seats dry, let's go ahead and take a moment to enjoy one of the best woodworking sounds there are. and then straight into some of the worst woodworking sounds, but at least it's doing the work and not me, so I'll take it. I use my crosscut sled to square this all up. You can actually go into my page. There's a short on how to build this. It's super simple. It's Norm Abrams style, so you know it's good. Now into a tricky part, which is getting your seat to have little cutouts so you can slide it all the way back. You could actually leave it forward, but it really does give it a unfinished, kind of homemade look. We're trying to get rid of that. The cutouts should just match the width and depth of your back legs, but sometimes that's not the case. So I go ahead and use my speed square to mark it up, and then we'll just take it over to the bandsaw and get a good cut. Take your time, get this right. This is one of the important parts of the seat that they're going to see every day, so you want to make sure it looks good. You can just as easily make these cuts using your hand saws. I wasn't able to fit this whole piece on my bandsaw, so instead of trying to flip it and mark lines underneath, I'm just bringing it over here to finish up all the cuts with a handsaw. Using some good hand tools really makes you feel like a real woodworker, but this is just the beginning. Just wait till we try to cut out the butt for the seat. Now the seat is almost ready to go. I'm going to use a 3/8 inch roundover bit. We're going to take it along every edge on the top, even inside our cutout of the legs, which this also fixes any measurement errors you might have had if they're not fully flush to those back legs. This will give it its nice shaker style look and take away any of those issues. A quick switch from the seat. Before we actually install the seat, I want to put a 45-degree chamfer on the top of these legs. This is what makes your work stand out. Doing these little things really shows some craftsmanship and thought when it comes to the customer. Now, let's get this seat installed. We're definitely not done with it, but go ahead and get it installed before we start trying to cut out the butt. I'm using these dominoes, but I'm also going to connect it to the apron with 2 screws. It's the only screws I use in this project, but I really felt the need to just to make sure this is fully secured. I'm just now realizing I got no video of actually installing the backrest. I just used 4 dominoes, put the 8-inch piece of wood on there. Nothing very special when it comes to that. Now it's time for a pretty unique part of this build, and that's actually cutting out the butt indentation. The simplest way I found is just to sit on it, kind of mark out where your butt lies so you can get a rough estimate. I do have a grinder with some of these wood grinding wheels. I'll try to link it all down at the bottom. If you guys know an easier method to put these butt indentions in, please let me know. Leave it in the comments. With this wood carving, you really have to channel your inner artistic woodworker. The best method I've found is really just starting with what's going to be your deepest spot, usually the back of the butt so they can sit down into it. So I start there trying to bring my depth, and then I slowly work it towards the front as I go less deep, keeping with my shape. After that, you have to hit it with the belt sander. If you try to go straight in with the orbital sander, it's just going to take you hours and hours of sanding to get rid of all these lines. So start first with this belt sander, and then come back afterwards and we'll just hit it with the orbital sander. This bar stool actually has a knot on top, so you want to make sure to secure it. A lot of people use super glue. I use super glue probably most of the time. Sometimes the super glue can have air bubbles in it, which is super annoying, so I love this epoxy paste that I can just rub right on in, sand it in 15 minutes, and we're good to go. This next step is optional, but I do suggest doing it. That is adding these adjustable feet. I always find whenever I take furniture over somebody's house, their floors are never flat. It's just the way it is. So I love these adjustable feet. Then I don't have to worry about it. It also gives the customer an option if they want to raise these bar stools up. If one person's shorter, another one's taller, they can raise it up to their height they want. The biggest tip I have when installing these is just to use super glue on the threads. If you don't, they can definitely, or I should say they will fall out at some point. So use super glue to really lock them in. Finally, we are on to the finish. I'm using Rubio Monocoat Pure. You can use lacquer, polyurethane. I would suggest if you're using those to spray them. That's far easier on furniture like this than trying to paint them on with the paintbrush. I greatly appreciate you guys following along with this build. Please leave a comment, a like, even subscribe, and I'll keep the content coming.